Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Punk Rock Politics. This is John Smith from Punk Rock Politics Sideways. What we're going to do here is we're going to watch Bernie Sanders address last night during the election. Notice he doesn't even bring up the election because he's so concerned about the coronavirus. And don't forget, he has the most sensible plan to deal with us, keep us safe now and into the future. And so make sure that we're more prepared for this and that everybody is safe, health-wise and economically. So whoever you are, realize that the Democratic Party establishment is doing a terrible job, and they're actually being outflanked and on the left by the Republicans and Donald Trump. So if that's happening, you know that there's a better plan, and it's Bernie Sanders' plan. So let's watch Bernie Sanders, and then I'm going to give you some commentary and analysis after that. So let's check this out. All right. Looks like I'm not full. Make sure I get the full view here. Sorry about that. All right. Here we go. And by the way, since we're still waiting for Sanders to speak, I wanted to show you the whole video. Just want to let you know that this is a Now This video. This is from Now This. And they do some pretty great videos, not always, but here we go.
Is there a way we could increase the font slightly? No. Is it all bold?
All right, sorry about that quick little issue. It's cool because it shows you how they set up for this stuff.
Is it all bold?
Check it out.
Can we unbold it? Let me just see. I just know what he likes to. Yeah, you're right. Bold it. Sorry. And one more font size up. All right. Good. And you know if you ever get into compliment.
So he was just discussing how, how Bernie Sanders likes his prompter to read, and, Bernie Sanders doesn't always use a prompter. In fact, he's a politician that often doesn't use a prompter. He doesn't prep for debates. It is definitely debatable whether or not he should start doing that. I think if he was more prepared for the debate, he is obviously a very intelligent man, who's very passionate and knowledgeable, and has a long history of fighting for our causes for the working class. The vast majority of Americans, really all Americans, even the rich, benefit from his policies. If you know anything about economics, but what's interesting, to note is that he could do a better job with the debate against Joe Biden, and he needs to be prepped. I think that's very clear, and we should all make it very clear to Bernie Sanders that you need to prep for your debate. You need to, and you need to hit Joe Biden much harder on his record and his lies. It'll give you more leverage. I don't care what they say. There'll be a lot of pressure for you not to do so, but the people behind you want you to do it, and we're supporting your campaign and donating and volunteering and disseminating information that the mainstream media will not give out. So, we're doing a lot to, to make your campaign possible. And this is a fight, like you say, not me, us. So we really need you, Bernie Sanders, to fight much harder, because Joe Biden's record of lying is just is so extensive. He's almost as bad as Trump. And that's, a pretty high bar of lying. So it's pretty scary to say that. He's also had as a record of saying sexist and racist things and all kinds of just poor poor issues. You'll notice here that with this debate, he has a more presidential podium, and the flags and stuff. And they said that Joe Biden looked more presidential when he gave his first speech on coronavirus. Unfortunately, that impacts a lot of people. They say, like, there's a claim out there that a speech is like 90% of like eye contact and your body posture as opposed to what you're saying. But this is coronavirus. This is very serious. So we need to take policies into consideration. And even people that aren't active in politics, you need to share this with everybody and let them know what's going on, because the results in Arizona are atrocious. I'm going to do a video after this on how the people that are are failing, don't have polling places, are not only the poor, working class, Latino, black, white, all poor people in general are working class people, and they're the biggest supporters of Bernie Sanders. There's all kinds of voter suppression going on, and it's at the behest of the Democrats are doing it. So they always claim the Republicans, oh my God, they're the ones, committing all of this voter suppression. It's undemocratic. But when it comes to them, they do whatever they want. Now, unfortunately, legally, the Democratic Party can do whatever it wants in its primaries, and unfortunately, a judge found that to be true. And international law doesn't require them to. They don't have anything to say with, and we should change this. We should fight for international law. We should lead the world with this and say that if our primary process for picking our parties are rigged, that we have a process where we can have observers come in and address the situation. It's like a powder keg waiting to explode. Coronavirus is only highlighting the extreme failures of a capitalist system. And actually, we're kind of not really even in a capitalist or a free market system by any means, because we don't follow the constraints of that. So we have labor cross borders. We have money flow across borders, and too easily. It's not supposed to flow across borders at all, except when absolutely necessary. We don't provide all the goods and services that a country needs and is important to democracy at home. We outsourced everything. So we have a serious problem, and the climate crisis only exacerbates it. So this is a very serious moment in American history, and I study history and politics, and have for many years. At several, two different colleges, on my own time. And research, and just very committed to it. Here you go. I don't know what this guy's doing. They seem confused. I apologize for this. I didn't realize this was so long. I think I might try to fast forward here. But we definitely need an international law that says that even our primary process, if it's rigged, if there's voter suppression and people, for Christ's sake, they're having people vote during a pandemic, a global pandemic. This is absurd. The federal government's telling people to stay home and not gather in large groups, or even like some cases they're either saying, first it was 50, then I heard 40, now it's like 10, I think, and you're supposed to stay 6 feet apart from people. How are you supposed to, people aren't going to come out. They're afraid of getting sick or even if they're young and healthy, they're afraid of passing the disease on to their loved ones, and you don't know if you have it for at least 2 weeks. So this is an absurd proposition. It's anti-democratic, and a lot of the older voters went out and voted because they felt it was their civic duty, and those people disproportionately favor Biden. But what they don't talk about is how Bernie Sanders, that they did only at the time, in Nevada actually gained a lot of steam with even the 65 and older crowd, which is Joe Biden's it's the only people that vote for him. So it's ridiculous. The results are absurd. There was the exit polls are way off, meaning that there's only one company that does exit polls, and forgive me, I don't know their name, but I'll definitely cover it in more videos. I've talked about it in the past, and they do the raw exit polls before they adjust them to the inaccuracies of the voting booths. I believe that was Faiz Shakir. That's Bernie Sanders' campaign manager. Really, really cool guy. Anyway, sorry. So, yeah. This is a serious crisis. Everybody I know is stressed out. Everybody's worried. Here we go. There you go.
How's everybody enjoying Burlington? Well, thank you all for being here. In the midst of a major healthcare crisis that is currently facing our country, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the lessons that we can learn long-term about what we are experiencing today. As I discussed yesterday, our country is facing, as everybody knows, a medical and economic crisis, the likes of which we have not seen for generations. And we must prepare for this response in an unprecedented way, making certain that our government responds effectively and protects the interest of all of our people, regardless of their income or where they live. In other words, this is not just about giving tax breaks to large corporations, but it is about remembering the people today who do not have much money, who are very nervous about their economic futures and about their health care prospects. Needless to say, we must massively increase the availability of test kits for the coronavirus and the speed in which those tests are processed. We need to anticipate significant increases in hospital admissions, which means that we will need more ICU units and ventilators. We will need more doctors, more nurses, and medical personnel of all kinds. And we must make sure that these frontline personnel are well protected from the diseases they are treating. I have talked to nurses recently who worry very much about whether they're getting the kind of knowledge they need and the equipment they need to make sure that they do not get sick. We need to significantly improve our communications and collaboration with other countries to assure that we are learning everything that we can about the successes and failures other countries are encountering as they deal with this crisis. And furthermore, we must be honest with the American people and communicate as effectively and directly as we can with all of the scientific information that we can provide. Further, and perhaps most importantly, our response to this entire crisis must be guided by the decisions of doctors, scientists, and researchers, not politicians. But as we struggle with this crisis, it is also important that we learn the lessons of how we got to where we are today and what we must do in the future so that we are better prepared for similar crises that may come. Poll after poll already shows us that the American people understand that we must do what every other major country on earth does, and that is to guarantee health care to all of our people as a human right, not a privilege. As we begin to see the failures and vulnerabilities of the current healthcare system, my guess is that those numbers and the demand for universal health care will only go up. The American people are asking, how is it possible that we spend twice as much per capita as the people of Canada and other major countries, while 87 million of us are uninsured or underinsured? And obviously, in this crisis, and unbelievably, it means that people who are sick today, people who woke up this morning with symptoms of the coronavirus, are saying, I feel sick, but I can't afford to go to a doctor. And when somebody is not treated for the virus, somebody who is unable to afford to go to that doctor, that means that that infection can spread to many others, putting us at risk. So it's not just a question that in normal times, tragically, unbelievably, we lose some 30,000 people a year because they don't get to a doctor on time. But now the lack of health insurance for many millions of people
the newest study
threatens other people as well.
Says $68,000 a year, actually. If 68,000 people die a year,
so much
the new
more
Yale study.
Than what other countries
Medicare for
are
all.
spending. We have millions of people who may be dealing with the virus, but who cannot go to a doctor because they cannot afford it. That is a question that must resonate in every American's mind. If this isn't a red flag for the current dysfunctional and wasteful healthcare system, frankly, I don't know what is. For the benefit of all of us, we must make sure that every person in this country who needs to seek medical treatment can go to a doctor free of charge regardless of their income. That is obviously what we must do now in the middle of the crisis, but that is what we must do as a nation in the near future. And here are just a few instances about how absurd and dysfunctional our current healthcare system is. It has been estimated that a full battery of tests for the coronavirus cost over $1,300. So first of all, take a look at that. $1,300 to get the test people need to have to know whether they have the virus or not. In America today, 40% of our people don't have $400 in the bank to pay for an emergency expense. We have half our people living paycheck to paycheck. If their car breaks down, they can't afford to get it fixed. And if somebody tells them it's going to cost $1,300 for the test that you need to determine whether you have the coronavirus, what are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? What happens to them? Maybe they end up going to a payday lender where they can pay 50 or 100% interest rates on borrowing the money that they need. Do they borrow money from their families, or do they go without a test, which every doctor in the world will tell them is a test they should have? And while the Trump administration says it may cover copays to cover the cost of testing for those who have insurance, they will not cover the cost of treatment, which could cost tens of thousands of dollars. How cruel is that? How absurd is that? To say to people, well, we're sorry you have the coronavirus. We actually covered the cost of the test, but now you're on your own. And it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to get treated. That is totally absurd. Clearly, what we need to do is to make sure that if somebody has the coronavirus, that person gets the treatment they need. In other words, we have a healthcare system today which leaves millions of people uninsured. But even if you have insurance, you may not have the ability to travel to a doctor near you. Because now we're talking about a system in which many rural hospitals have closed down and people cannot find a doctor in their communities. The reality today, and this is an issue we must deal with, is that we do not have enough doctors, we don't have enough hospitals, we don't have enough clinics in rural communities and in inner cities. Further, we are in a situation when we desperately need affordable prescription drugs. Yet we have a pharmaceutical industry that continues to make billions in profits by charging outrageous prices for prescription drugs, sometimes 10 times more in this country than in other countries. In my view, the most cost-effective way to reform our dysfunctional and cruel system is to move to a Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare system. And I think in the midst of this crisis, more and more Americans understand the truth of that. It is nearly impossible to believe that anyone can still think it's acceptable to continue with a healthcare system that leaves tens of millions of people uninsured. The cruelty and absurdity of that view is more obvious in the midst of this crisis than it has ever been. And let's be clear, the lack of health care and affordable medicine does not only threaten the health care and well-being of the uninsured, it impacts everyone who comes in contact with them. In fact, what this crisis is beginning to teach us is that we are only as safe as the least insured person in America. Further, we are the only major country on earth, that does not mandate paid family and medical leave. And we're seeing how that crisis is impacting where we are today. As we speak, there are millions of workers right now who are being told not to go to work, yet that they may be ill and should be staying home. But these very same families will face financial ruin if they don't go to work. These are workers in the restaurant industry, transportation industry, tourism, retail. In other words, the people who interact with the public every single day. Right now, at a time when half of our people live paycheck to paycheck, and at a time of massive wealth and income inequality, We must directly address the economic desperation facing a huge number of Americans. So, we must finally pass a paid family leave program in the United States to keep this virus from spreading and to keep Americans healthy. We must do it right now. People should not be going to work when they are sick. It is unfair to them. It is unfair to the people they are in contact with. And yet, that reality exists because we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee paid family and medical leave and sick time. Finally, from a national security perspective, it is incomprehensible that we are dependent on China and other countries for masks, for prescription drugs, for rubber gloves, and for key parts needed to make advanced medical equipment like ventilators. As a result of globalization and our disastrous trade policies, we have been outsourcing millions of jobs and factories overseas that have gutted our economy. Now we are seeing another tragic and devastating result of those policies as we find ourselves dependent on other countries to provide the most essential things we need to combat a pandemic and protect the lives of the people in our country. Now, trade is a good thing, but it has to be based on common sense principles. It has to be based on protecting American workers and protecting our national security, making sure that we are producing what we need in this country in the event of a national crisis. Now is the time to begin bringing back production and manufacturing to the United States and enact fair trade policies so that we are never in this position again. Now here is the bottom line. As we are dealing with this crisis, we need to listen to the scientists, to the researchers, and to the medical professionals, not politicians. We need to move quickly to prepare for the exponential increase of cases we will be seeing here in our country. But as we do that, we must begin thinking about how, as a society, we can create a healthcare and economic system that is humane, that is compassionate, and that works for all people, not just the wealthiest.
Fuck yeah!
Now that is an issue that people have been thinking about for a long time, but I think in this moment of crisis, more and more people understand that we need fundamental changes to our economy, we need fundamental changes to our healthcare system. I'd be happy to take a few questions. Yeah, Gary? That's a tough question, and I'll tell you why. Elections are the bedrock of our democracy, and we don't want to be, delaying elections on a willy-nilly basis. On the other hand, if my memory is correct, in states like Ohio and in many other states, schools are being closed down. The NBA has ceased its season. Broadway is now shut down. So there is obviously a growing concern about bringing people together and spreading the virus. So I think the answer to your good question is this is an issue where the doctors and the scientists and the public health officials are going to have to be weighing the risk. I don't think there's anybody out there, no matter what your political view may be, who wants to see people become infected because they are voting. So that's a decision that I hope the public officials in the various states will consult with their public health people and their doctors to make that decision. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Obviously, the way that the coronavirus is affected is schedule events,
Right.
staff work from home.
Yeah.
Especially at a time, when really needed to be making a case as many people as possible. How are you feeling about how this is affecting your campaign?
That's why I'm here today. You're right, it has significantly impacted our campaign, as all of you know. We do, I think, more rallies than anybody else. They're often very well attended. I love to do them. We have done dozens of town meetings throughout this campaign, which I love also because you can hear directly from people, and that is changing. As you've indicated correctly, our staff is now by and large working at home. So it has radically changed our campaign. What I think we have going for us, which we have always had going for us, but we're going to have to utilize even more, is our internet capabilities. We have many, many, many millions of people who follow us on Twitter, follow us on other platforms. We live stream, everything that we do. I think we're probably live streaming this, and many, many hundreds of thousands of people will be watching. So we are in the process of thinking this through, but this coronavirus has obviously impacted our ability to communicate with people in the traditional way that we do, and that's hurting. Yeah, sure. No, I have not. Thank God I don't have any of the symptoms. To the best of my knowledge, I have not interacted with anybody who has the virus. So at a time when people are desperately trying to get into the testing, I don't want to put myself in front of anybody else. So that's that. Here is my concern. Traditionally, especially under Republican administrations, the response to crises, economic crises, has often been to protect the wealthy and large corporations, and I would refer you to the Wall Street bailout and tax breaks we have recently seen for billionaires and for large profitable corporations. My concern is that in the midst of this crisis, we pay attention to the most vulnerable people in this country. I was in New York City the other day to do the Jimmy Fallon show, and we were traveling around rush hour. And you know what? There wasn't a rush. A lot of people went out on the roads. I talked to drivers. They're not getting the business they used to. Restaurants are not getting the businesses. Conventions are being canceled. The tourism business is in downfall right now. Let us not forget today those workers who are being impacted by this crisis, and let us develop policies that speak to their needs. That means extending and expanding unemployment benefits, dealing with paid family leave and sick time and medical leave. So let us focus on working families, and I have my doubts about how effectively the Trump administration will do that. Yeah.
Senator, you're going to go back to Washington now. You have an opportunity now to work with your colleagues to come up with solutions to this problem. Obviously, there's already proposals that are being discussed. What can you specifically do as a United States Senator to help address this crisis? You have legislation that you think are...
Right. We are going to... Good question. We're going to be working with our colleagues to do exactly what I just said in response to Jacques' question. I think, and most Americans understand, that it is totally insane that in the richest country on earth, we are the only major country not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. You have, on top of that, people who are having jobs in this country who have no vacation time, or maybe 1 week vacation time. I think now is the time to make sure that every American has the paid family and medical leave that exists in other countries around the world. That is something we'll be fighting for. Unemployment compensation. Right now there are many people who are not covered by unemployment at all, and we want to make sure that every American who loses his or her job gets covered by that program. And needless to say, right now, we must guarantee health care to every single American at no cost to them, and as we move to a Medicare for all system. So to answer your question, what the focus, I will be working with my colleagues. My focus will be on protecting the working class and the most vulnerable people in this country, including many elderly people. I'm sitting here wondering, I know that in my state, this state, and in states all over this country, the Meals on Wheels program, which is such an important program, often has long waiting lines. Now, what happens if you're an elderly person right now and you are told you are the most vulnerable population? You can't get out of the house, don't go out of your house, don't go shopping. What happens to those people? Is anybody paying attention to them? Is anybody visiting with them? So those are some of the areas that we'll be working. Yes, sir. answer is, not frustrating. I wouldn't use that word. What I would say is that right now, the absurdity and the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system is becoming apparent to everybody. And maybe this is an issue that Joe Biden and I will be discussing on Sunday night. But the idea that people are now saying, well, we should spend as much as it takes, when in fact, in normal times, we are spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as any other people, while the healthcare industry made $100 billion last year in profits, and the pharmaceutical industry makes huge profits as well. So as I said earlier, I think maybe for Mr. Biden, maybe for other people, this is the time to think about our current healthcare system, and how does it happen that after we spend so much, so many of us are uninsured or underinsured? Is the function of healthcare just to make huge profits for the insurance industry and the drug companies, or should it be to provide quality care to all? And it's not even just the uninsured and underinsured. It's parts of this country, as you all know, in rural America, where hospitals have shut down. What do you do when there's an emergency? You have no medical care near you. What do you do when there aren't enough doctors, there aren't enough nurses? How does that happen? So I would hope that this crisis, maybe that's my main point today, that this crisis should be a moment in which people ask fundamental questions about the dysfunctionality of our current healthcare system, and have the guts to finally say to the healthcare industry, the drug companies, the insurance companies, and others, that the function of a rational healthcare system is to provide quality care to all, not to make billions in profits for the people who own the industry. Yeah, Carl?
You were talking about this, people find themselves children. I think it would then be hard to expect them to come out and vote during these primaries.
Yeah.
To follow up on Gary's question, anyone from your team has reached out to the DNC?
Yes. No, that's a good point. I mean, you're raising, that's an additional point to the one that I made. I think we are told right now that we should stay away from other people, that we don't want to see the virus being spread. And in state after state, schools are being shut down. Large functions are being shut down. But your point is an additional point, which I think is right. If in states right now, and this is just an issue we have to deal with in so many ways, if child care centers are being shut down, and they are, if schools are being shut down, and they are, what are parents supposed to do? What do? Well, they're going to have to stay home and take care of the kids. Can you go out and vote when you're staying home taking care of your little kids? The answer is you can't. So all I would say is I think that the governors and the officials in the states that are that have elections scheduled for Tuesday have to balance things. Again, rescheduling elections is not something we do lightly or should do lightly. On the other hand, at this particular moment, it is absolutely appropriate that public officials, governors, etc., listen to public health officials. And your point is also important, to make sure that everybody who wants to vote has the right to vote. And that may not be the case today. Okay. Yeah, we have. Yes, we have talked to the DNC about this. Yes.
Yeah.
I would. As I was asked early on, to the best of my knowledge, I have not been in proximity to somebody who had the virus. If I knew that I was, I would get tested, and I think that holds true for the president. And I think as president, he has the right to release that information. Okay, guys? Yeah.
I wonder, I know that the dynamics of your campaign itself have changed a lot because of what happened with the
Right.
virus. And there's obviously some within the Democratic Party that are concerned that you might be staying in the race for too long. Has that rethought, have you been forced to rethink your position in the race, and what is your long-term goal as you move forward?
Well, my long-term goal is to win. The short-term goal is to figure out how we deal with the issues that you guys are appropriately raising. Under normal circumstances, I would not be in Burlington today. I would be probably in Ohio, Florida, or another state where a primary is coming up. But we've decided not to do, under the advice of public health officials, not to do rallies, and that's the right decision. So we are figuring out a way as to how we can best communicate with people, which will, certainly be in a very strong way utilizing our social media capabilities. Okay, guys, thank you very much.
Okay, guys. I'm just curious if anybody says anything here. I don't believe they do. So we're going to make a switch soon. Let me just see how much time is left on this. Oh, it's over. Pretty much, right? I think that's it. Alright. So we're going to do a little switcheroo. What's going on here? I'm going to take you back into my world. Alright. I mean, what a... Wow. I don't even want to say anything until I get this appropriately set up. All I can say is that was one hell of a presidential speech. I mean, let me ask you something. Even if you're not a fan
one of the
Bernie
most
Sanders,
challenging parts of
boy.
meditation.
Sorry about that. A commercial for the stupid video on YouTube. Yep. All right. So we have an issue here. Joe Biden and Donald Trump lie more than anybody that's ever been tested for lying on the record, and they can't be our president. Neither one of them, and if either one of them are, by any chance in this election, is further stolen, and Bernie Sanders is impacted because they keep having primaries while nobody's even supposed to be in public or near within 6 feet of people, and depress the turnout, and since he can't have rallies, I mean, this is just disturbing. But let's get into the substance. Forget if 75. He's the most popular U.S. senator in the country, by 75 to 80% in polls for fucking since at least 2013 or 14. He's a very popular guy. Actually, the myth is that he's not. The people love Bernie Sanders, whether they're Republicans, Independents, Democrats, moderates, conservatives, liberals, progressives, blah, blah, blah. People fucking love Bernie Sanders for a reason, because these are just common sense policies. Now, I was getting emotional. I mean, that's what a president is supposed to look like. Bernie Sanders is the aspiration this country has always had. Trust the scientists. Trust the healthcare professionals. Trust healthcare workers. Trust the people that should be in charge. Do not trust politicians. He's telling you what we should do, but he's also telling you trust the scientists. Medicare for all better. Joe Biden lied about it in the debate on March 15th. He said that it was hindering Italy's response to the coronavirus or COVID-19. Lie. Look it up. If anything, it would have been way worse without their single-payer system. So we need Medicare for all. We need it now. He's making the point. I mean, it's so freaking obvious. If everybody needs to be... The only point he didn't make, which I think he should have made, is that even illegal immigrants or undocumented workers or whatever you want to call them, from either perspective, they put everybody at risk. But they also, clean people's toilets, clean their homes, help the elderly. And this is true of other alienated people that are, from the islands and stuff, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, all that, to take care of our families and stuff, and they're not doing, they're not making a lot of money, and they're not even allowed to leave on holidays and stuff. So it's a rough gig. They rarely leave the job, and they're with somebody a lot who's going through issues. So we should appreciate them, the people that are most vulnerable in society. Bernie Sanders is absolutely right. So his plan it goes further. These are just some of the main points, but family sick leave. We need paid sick leave. We don't want people going to work if they're sick. And the funny thing is that it's so obvious that this has to be done, because this puts even rich people at risk. It puts politicians at risk. They can't have even a bunch of poor people with this virus. It gets spread like wildfire. We need Medicare for all now. As a common sense measure, we needed it before, and this just exposes how dysfunctional our healthcare system is. We need Medicare for all right fucking now, so none of us, or less of us, get sick, suffer, and die. It should be free tests. There should be free tests. You should be able to walk into it. This is what Medicare for all is. You walk into a doctor anywhere in the U.S., you're a U.S. citizen, bam, free. Go anywhere you want. Get a psychiatrist, get a psychologist, get a surgery. That's it. Now, there's certain things that aren't deemed medically necessary, but right now we deem a lot of things that should be medically necessary not medically necessary in this dysfunctional system, such as getting your teeth fixed. I grind my teeth, and I didn't realize it for a while, and they're all messed up. I used to be told my teeth were perfect. I need those fixed, but my insurance doesn't pay for it because they say it's cosmetic. What goes on with your mouth affects your health, and it could hurt your heart and many other major organs. Like, it could affect your health seriously, and that's why in other countries with a Medicare for all system, all other industrialized nations, wealthier industrialized nations, they have a Medicare for all system. And you know why? Because it saves money, streamlines everything. It's more efficient. The doctors are for it. Now they're finally for it. The majority of doctors, they got an organization. They came out. They were against it. Now they're not. They're for it. It's more efficient. Nurses are for it. The people are for it. I mean, we're talking about like 70 to 90% of people in various polls, depending on how the question is asked, to try to frame a response or not frame a response. Listen. We need paid sick leave. We don't want people going to work if they're sick. We don't want them getting them sick. It puts us all at risk. It's absurd. We need everybody to be able to go to a doctor for free. At least for now, as he said. And I think it'll only show why we just want to keep it. And we should. We need Medicare for all now. Every single person, regardless of age, can have this. And we don't know if you have it for 2 weeks, and sometimes you get it and don't show symptoms, and you'll be okay, but for a while you'll carry it and pass it to other people. This is crazy. And it only highlights the dysfunction of a capitalist system that actually ended up turning into a globalized economy, like Bernie Sanders was talking about. This is a national security issue. We need other countries who are going to use leverage over us. We need goods from them. We need hand sanitizer. We need toilet paper. We need a whole bunch of medical supplies. We need prescription drugs, as Bernie Sanders was saying. That's insane. Think about that for a minute. We don't produce the stuff we need to survive because both parties have outsourced all of the work to other countries, and they're exploiting labor horribly, like something that we would never allow here, or there'd be a violent revolution. We're exploiting the youth, the old, all kinds of workers, all ages. And we do it here too, but not on this level. And this is what we do, And we say we're building countries. We're exploiting labor and putting people in awful conditions. This is not the time to mess around. So on top of that, Bernie Sanders' plan, he didn't discuss it here, but I don't think he said it. Maybe he did. But $2,000 for every American, every citizen, right now. And that needs to be done. The Republicans are asking for $1,000. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden's, the first floated Joe Biden running mate, and he did say he's definitely picking a woman for president, and they leaked all of his awful picks, including Michael Bloomberg, a Republican, for years, an authoritarian who extended his mayorship, which was only supposed to be 2 terms for 4 years, to 12 years. The guy's borderline, he's a dictator, and he's got like $60 billion. He's going to make him the head of the World Bank for the U.S., and that's the most powerful position at the World Bank. Most influential. Absurd. The guy's he's a lunatic. He loves dictators. The whole lie was Bernie Sanders did. No, Bernie Sanders has been condemning authoritarianism of any stripe and calling for democracy everywhere, all around the world, and he means it, and he says it, and he believes in it. Now, the issue of him not being able to have rallies with this disease is huge. But Bernie Sanders, when he was giving this speech, this was the night, the day. This was during the elections in Arizona, Illinois, and Florida. Ohio canceled theirs, and then the DNC came out, and Tom Perez, and believe me, Tom Perez needs to be fired from the DNC, and said that people need to vote. They're not going to take their civic duty to vote, and a lot of people stayed home, including the youth. There weren't polls, and a lot of poor and Latin and black and poor white and poor any ethnicity, just poverty in general. But all of the and young people, and this is where they're suppressing the vote. The Democratic Party is doing this. They claim the Republican Party is doing this, and they are. They suppress the vote, and they totally try to get minorities and young people not to vote. But the Democrats are worse. They did this in 2016. They're doing it again. Okay, this is absurd. So Bernie Sanders rose above politics, and he said, listen, okay, we shouldn't be sending out people to vote when scientists, even the Trump administration, is telling people to stay home, closing everything down, closing down schools, states of emergency, telling you not to gather in groups. First it was 50, then it was 40, now it's 10. Now they're saying don't be within 6 feet of anybody if you can. Wash your hands constantly if you touch any hard surfaces. I've been talking to a healthcare professional. That's a long, funny story. Thought it was my grandma's cell phone number. Ended up being somebody else, but she's seems all right. So anyway, she's close. So, all right. So Bernie Sanders hit on all the points. We need to give $2,000 to every citizen. All right. This is definitely, his platform is larger. I'm not sure I don't know if he got into specifics of that, but the unemployment for everybody who is either homesick or out of work. It's absurd that companies are gonna force people, or the government's gonna force people to have to go to work when they could be endangering themselves, their family, their friends, their neighbors, the people that work for them or with them, where they work. I mean, it's absurd. It's an absurd proposition. It always has been. Now, this is just highlighting what we've done to this country. Again, and great. So as a national security standpoint, it's amazing how he's saying we need to be able to do these things all the time. This is showing how bad trade deals, including Trump, with the USMCA or US Mexico Canada, the trade agreement, every country starts with their country name or something, so it's called 3 different things, but the US essentially NAFTA too, which Donald Trump ran against. So now he's instituting globalization policies that got him elected. So for another reason, fuck you, Donald Trump. Seriously, I take this challenge seriously, but I mean, come on. The guy lied about what has he gotten done that he said he was going to do? He gave a tax cut to billionaires and multimillionaires, and what? You can't even get an infrastructure bill passed. Are you kidding me? It was one of his main promises. That's the easiest thing to do. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Our pipes are disgusting. Our water's polluted. But they're cutting the EPA. But don't think Joe Biden's going to do any better. He'll do what the incrementalism. He'll go back to where it was, which was also already really bad. And him and his administration, him and the Obama and Joe Biden as vice president that he always brags about, what they did is they increased more oil production than friggin' a whole bunch of Republican presidents combined. Because it's just so just because they increased a little bit of solar, I mean, China's kicking her ass in solar, and that's absurd. They got all kinds of poverty. They got 1.5 billion people or something. It's ridiculous. For with them having extreme poverty, huge landmass, all kinds of different terrain and shit to deal with. Just it's just insane. So even within a free market system, if you think you believe in capitalism, this is a globalized economy set forth starting especially in the 80s with Ronald Reagan and following through every president since. And Bernie Sanders is the only one that truly has a record of calling these things out and wants to stop it. Trump is a pretend populist lying to you. If you believe in Trump's policies, Bernie Sanders will get all those policies and then some done. We will be safe. We will be a more prosperous country. And economically, see, I support these policies, not just because they're ethical and moral. It's also because if you knew anything about economics, these are how you build a mega society. We can be flying around with the fucking Jetsons. We need to invest in our society. College needs to be free, so we have more doctors. There should be no roadblocks for anybody who wants to go to school or get job training or become a mechanic or whatever. We're the richest country on earth. It's unacceptable. And now this crisis is highlighting how serious this is. And we need all the progressive policy that we were all telling you for so long that we need, and you said no, and now what do you have to say? I gotta tell you, people are pretty upset and pissed off and want to argue, whether they're moderate or even semi center of left people, not quite progressives like myself or many others, but hey, I'm honest with you. I'll tell you what I am. But that doesn't mean that I am not an independent-minded person, and if anybody can prove that I'm wrong, hey, we'll do it. I don't care if they call it conservative. I don't care what they call it. If it's the right thing to do and it's affordable and it's better for everybody, we're doing it. But that's the things we're calling for that have been historically proven to work. I wish Bernie Sanders would talk more about this, that, this country became the richest middle class in existence because of one policy that was continued and then one tax rate. Let me